3 states are suing the Biden administration over its ending of Title 42. What are some officials warning, and what are we expecting at the southern border as a result of the rule's repeal? NTD's Iris Tao has more.
And now it's about to get a whole lot worse, a whole lot worse.
That's what Representative Andy Biggs is saying about the upcoming influx of migrants at the southern border. The former Customs and Border Protection Commissioner is warning of the same.
A total, catastrophic, unmitigated crisis where we've handed over operational control of our borders to the cartels.
The backlash follows an announcement that the Biden administration will end Title 42, a pandemic-era restriction that has blocked many migrants from entering the U.S. And 3 Republican states, Arizona, Missouri, and Louisiana, are suing the Biden administration for ending Title 42, arguing that it was done unlawfully and will have a devastating impact on states.
Given the Biden administration's catch and release policies, this surge will lead to an ever-increasing number of aliens being released into American communities.
Some rights groups have called for an end to Title 42, calling its expulsions inhumane. But a former ICE director today defended it, saying,
"Well, illegal immigration is down 83%. How many women didn't get raped? How many children didn't drown? How many Americans didn't die of overdose deaths?"
I think there should be consistency.
Meanwhile, several Democratic senators are also calling to oppose the end of Title 42. Biggs says more are recognizing how an insecure border will sway the upcoming midterm elections.
As Democrats look at it and they say they've got a real electoral challenge coming up in November, and they know that Americans, particularly in my state of Arizona, this is a top 1 or 2 issue.
Reporting Washington, D.C., Iris Tao, NTD News.
The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention will be undergoing a sweeping 1-month review. CDC head Rochelle Walensky announces that the agency is making an effort to modernize how public health programs are delivered to the American people. The agency has been under mounting public scrutiny over how it has responded to the COVID-19 pandemic. In a statement on Monday, the CDC said that throughout the pandemic, the agency has worked to speed up data reporting and scientific processes. It now wants to formally adopt the changes it has made and what it has learned throughout the pandemic. The agency says it will also develop new ways to adapt to the changing environment. Congressman Fred Upton of Michigan announces that he will retire from office. Upton is one of the longest-serving Republicans in the House, and he is also one of the 10 Republicans that voted to impeach former President Trump after the January 6th Capitol breach.
Even the best stories has a last chapter. This is it for me. I've done the zillions of airline miles back and forth. I've signed Fred to over 1 million letters, cast more votes than anyone in this chamber while here, and by most accounts have succeeded in making a difference, accomplishing what I've set out to do with more unfinished work still yet to come.
Upton has represented Western Michigan since 1987. Including Upton, 16 Republicans and 31 Democrats in the House have said that they're not running for re-election in the 2022 midterms. And Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and Joint Chiefs of Staff Mark Milley highlighted a strategy to increase American troops in Europe during the Defense Department's budget hearing.
My advice would be to create permanent bases, but don't permanently station. So you get the effect of permanence by rotational forces cycling through permanent bases. And what you don't have to do is incur the cost of family moves, PXs, schools, housing, and that sort of thing.
He told the House Armed Services Committee that several allies, including Poland and Romania, were supportive, as this would help defend against Russia. They also discussed the importance of training our allies, as well as the case in Ukraine.
Well, we've learned that armed with the right capabilities, a determined force can do tremendous work in terms of defending itself, and the Ukrainians demonstrate that each and every day.
The budget hearing lasted several hours, covering multiple defense issues. In his opening statement, Secretary Lloyd Austin named China as America's biggest defense challenge. The U.S. is expected to announce yet another round of sanctions on Russia. This comes amid President Biden's calls to try Russian President Vladimir Putin for war crimes. Over the weekend, we had a chance to ask former National Security Advisor under former President Trump, retired General Michael Flynn, about his overall assessment of the Russia-Ukraine war. Here's part of what he had to say. General Michael Flynn, thank you so much for joining us in the
Appreciate
Capitol
it,
Report.
Steve, thank you.
General, I want to get your thoughts on the Ukraine-Russia war. Big picture, what's your take?
Yeah, so first of all, I just want to thank Epoch Times for all that you guys do. I mean, your whole organization, the enterprise that you represent is really extraordinary. Your reporting, your honesty, your authenticity is terrific. So I want to get that on the table for listeners and anybody that needs to know where to find the truth. So, okay, Russia, Ukraine, Europe, what's happening? And at the 60,000 foot level, this was a totally avoidable war. So totally avoidable. This goes back to, I really believe, it goes back a long way, but it really goes back to 1994, what was called the Budapest Accords in Budapest, Hungary, between, at the end of the Cold War, right? At the time it was Gorbachev was the head of the Soviet Union, and basically the collapse of the Soviet Union. In France, you had Mitterrand. In the United Kingdom, you had Margaret Thatcher. And in the United States, you had George Bush, the father, right? So they had a meeting, and at that meeting, the essential, one of the big ticket items that came out of the Budapest Accords was no further encroachment of NATO against this new Russian Federation, and also that meeting was the decision to unify Germany, both West Germany and East Germany. So some big strategic issues in play, one of which was no more encroachment of NATO up to the Russian Federation frontier and borders. And the reason why is because of the threat. We still had the threat of nuclear weapons and a nuclear exchange. And with whoever was going to be future leaders of any of those nations, we didn't want to get into a potential place where we had nuclear missiles literally right across the boundary of two major nation state, or in the case of NATO or Europe, in the case between Russia and really the European frontier. We didn't want to have nuclear weapons that close to each other. Makes a lot of sense. Now, Steve, we're in a place where it began. Okay, so now is where mistakes will be made, and mistakes are being made, and people's lives are at risk, and many people have already lost their lives. Because once war begins, the inertia of war creates all kinds of second, third, fourth order effects, because when you start to shoot things in the night, right, and you have all these things that are happening, people make mistakes, right? That's the tragedy of war. The one thing, and we're here in one of our rallies here in Oregon. One of the things I said to the audience this morning is, war is a failure of policy and diplomacy. Okay, war is not something that anybody wants. War is not an opportunity. Okay, as I think Biden stated maybe a week or so ago, it's not an opportunity. War is a failure. It's a failure. Anytime you see states, nation states at war with each other, it's because there's a failure to communicate some way, somehow. And that's what happened.
And I want to get your perspective. You have a unique perspective, both from an intelligence community perspective and being a general. When you heard President Biden's comments about potentially taking out Putin, what effect does that have? What is your understanding of those things?
They know because, and everybody in the world knows, because immediately after he said it, they had to start walking it back. They had to start walking it back, right? Everybody in his circle had to start walking it back, because it's so wrong to say that. We're not talking about some fourth world nation here, third world nation. We're talking about a great nation state that has, many nuclear weapons, that has a large, relatively large economy, not a great economy, but a large economy, has a large population. It encompasses 8 time zones. It has been in historically, culturally. From a demographic standpoint. All these sort of big issues. It has been part of the world fabric for years, right? For centuries. So you just can't suddenly go, you know, you're bad and regime change. We need regime change. We need to get rid of Putin. You can't say stuff like that. A president of the United, I mean, I can sit here and say something stupid like that as just somebody, you know, from the former military, outside the military. Now I could say something like that, and people go, I didn't know what he's talking about. When the president of the United States makes comments like that, that means a lot.
General Michael Flynn, thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Anytime. I appreciate what Epoch Times is doing. God bless you.
The war in Ukraine is entering its second month, and the U.S. is supporting Ukraine by sending more drones and other equipment. This latest installment of supplies comes after Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky asked for help during an interview with CBS over the weekend. Ukrainian officials have also complained that the drones previously sent were insufficient models, and that air defense is the deciding factor for winning this war. Last month, the Biden administration promised a total of $800 million in military aid. The latest equipment is part of it.